Hello there, and welcome to A Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. So, I suppose throwing back to Candyman, which I discussed a few weeks ago, I very much feel the sense of commentary and the way in which the African American community within cinema is starting to express itself less in a, as well as the literal texts that we of course have within current narratives, things like The Hate You Give. We are also seeing it sort of expand into more lateral texts, more metatextual narratives that express ideas and aren't literal representations of the African American experience, but are more sort of a metaphorical representation that is open to interpretation, because the nature of narrative is that if you step away from relaying factual accounts of things or narrative sort of representations of life, if you make it more metaphorical, if you make it more symbolic, the meaning and the context changes on interpretation depending on who's reading it, or the context you apply to it, the community that it comes from, the society who are reading it. So Shakespeare can be read 100,000 different ways depending on what point in history you're reading it from, or what your perspective, what political interpretation you can apply to it. And so, of course, we've seen a huge expansion of the African American narrative within horror. I've talked already about Jordan Peele and his desire, his I suppose mission statement to become the next master of horror with Get Out and Us and The Twilight Zone. And of course, even his input into the Candyman, though not obviously his film, but the Candyman itself and the new version of the Candyman is very much reclaiming the Candyman mythos to express the experience of black people. Even though, of course, the original film did, but this is much... The new 2021 Candyman is much more... Again, there's subtexts and meanings now that are both relevant to the original, but also more relevant to now, and ideas of now, and the use of text now. And part of me did think, well, now that we're in October, perhaps I should lean in towards the horror. And I do still have that in mind, but I also felt like if I could... It gave me an excuse to be able to explore things that are not just straight horror, but are more richer and more complicated texts than just a horror narrative. And by no means is Sorry to Bother You a horror. Some people can interpret it that way, and the first time I watched it, I definitely had quite the shock partway through the film. But it is as much a horror, probably, as it is a comedy. Because Sorry to Bother You, as on paper, you could say, oh, well, it's a comedy. It's a workplace comedy with a surrealist edge to it. And that wouldn't be untrue. And yet, it poses a question that I think I've mentioned before, but I can't quite remember which film I discussed it with. But the idea of, can satire be non-comedic satire? Can you create the idea of sort of conversation pieces and parody social constructs and sort of refer to sort of relevant issues in a sort of weird, pointed, metaphorical, sort of metatextual sense without making it a comedy in the structures we understand comedy? And on this rewatch of Sorry to Bother You, because this is a film I saw a couple of years ago when it was out in cinemas, I was thinking about sort of what this harkens back to, and I am so glad that I saw Terry Gilliam's Brazil earlier this year, because I had such a strong connection between Brazil and this. And Brazil is even less of a comedy than this is. Brazil is almost on the cusp of being it is a 1984 dystopia with a slightly twisted sense of, like, black comedy sense of humour to it. But this, it probably does, I mean, it is funny. There are moments that you laugh at. The fact that, of course, our lead, Cassius Green, like, puts on the white voice, and that's funny. And the strange visuals make you laugh because they're so weird. The fact that when he first joins the call centre, he's thrown into people's homes, and whatever they're doing at that particular time is around him. He's literally in their homes as he's on the phone to them. You know, you have all these funny, strange, textual things that are going on. You have Tessa Thompson, you know, with her signs and the funny earrings that she wears, and it's funny, or at least it's amusing. But I still don't treat it like it's a comedy, because it's not. It doesn't make you laugh in the way that, you know, that you might guffaw, you might chuckle, but its objective isn't to make you sort of throw your head back in laughter. It's more, how weird is that? How strange is that? Isn't that noteworthy? Because it's so weird, and I find it amusing because it's so surrealist. And I suppose the other example I can think of that does that would be the League of the League of Gentlemen. Sorry, wrong. It's very confusing when you have two things called the League of such and such gentlemen. The League of Gentlemen, the Reece Shearsmith property, that, again, its weirdness does make you laugh, but there is that sort of horror inflection to it. But the point is more to sort of leave you with ideas in your mind and certain visuals. And I think Boots Riley has absolutely, in terms of cinema, captured that sense of weird visuals, certain ways things are being framed, certain interactions, set pieces that are just so odd and, like I said, surrealist, that the imagery sits in your mind, that and you want to sort of ponder over it. And the whole point is that you're supposed to think about the capitalist conversation, the nature of, you know, self-commodification, and the idea that, you know, we are going beyond just working. We are now selling ourselves and giving ourselves to great corporate overlords, you know, to the point where you have organisations like Worry Free, where it's, you know, it is practically, well, it is slavery, that these people are being put into these essential homes where they are working to have these homes paid for. And of course the commentaries there about the larger corporations growing and changing, and you know, we have things like Amazon and Apple, who of course are these huge conglomerates that no longer care about individuals. They care about sort of the financial structure, and you know, it becomes a question of, well, how far do humans sell themselves, and how far are people willing to give their bodies and their minds over? And of course, to the point where you have like Tessa Thompson, who, you know, even though she presents as she being above it all, you know, and being an artist who's trying to make commentary with her art, is also a product of that. And that she also sells herself in a certain way and presents herself in a certain way to, you know, to essentially use her body as a tool, as a selling point to audiences. And of course, there's the racial context of it, with, you know, the fact that it's about human commodification, and of course it harkens back to slavery and the continued status relationship between the black community in America and the white, and the idea that, you know, when you get into the third act, and I really don't want to discuss the third act because I think this is a film that really is better seen with no foreknowledge. You know, besides what I've said, there are certain moments in this film that I think are worth experiencing, you know, fresh. But the whole theme of human commodification and the dehumanization of people. And I think it's, this is the kind of text, and I think that's what really stands out to me, is the fact that it's the kind of text that I'm sure you could watch again and again and you would get different meanings, and there are layers and references and subtle foreground and background messages and jokes that are being said throughout the film. But I just think that, it's the kind of thing that almost warrants study. It's the kind of film that I hope in the future people will use in film class to sort of discuss how rich a text can be and yet how simple it can be, because it is just a contemporary set. Well, it's not contemporary because of course it has that sense of otherworldliness, but the great thing about this kind of film is the fact that it's not supposed to be a parallel universe to ours. Anything that is different from our world is supposed to be a metaphor or an analogy, or sort of a statement on our own world. I think I suppose the great tragedy of Boots Riley's narrative is the fact that following this coming out, it has become only more relevant in the wake of Black Lives Matter, of Breonna Taylor's murder, of sort of the of George Floyd's murder, and of the escalating racial tension between the black community and sort of police and institutions, and how that has come to the forefront in the last year or so. And like I say, the strange thing is the fact that it's in this text, and as I say, texts change, and this kind of film will evolve as society changes and community changes, and our readings become more nuanced. And the fact that all these things have happened within the media, within the real world, since the film has come out, only adds to the nature of the text. I really like this sort of evolution of this African American satire. We had, as well as this, there's also Atlanta, which is the Donald Glover TV series, which, isn't half, maybe a tenth as strange as this, because that's supposed to be the real world. There are just strange things and moments in it. But again, Donald Glover uses surrealism as satire to sort of make commentary, and he breaks the narrative specifically to sort of make a point, almost like he wants to turn to the audience and have a conversation with them. And I think I really like this kind of narrative, and I want to see more films like this, because they're not straightforward, they're not giving you answers, they are presenting ideas, and I think that's a really strong storytelling mechanism. Anyway, thank you for joining me. If you like this video, hit the like button, comment below, and share the video, because this will help with the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to get notifications of when new videos are uploaded. Check out my back catalogue of over 250 videos, and follow me on Twitter at Jordan_Watley, where I tweet about TV shows and films, and I share these videos once they're uploaded to YouTube, either the day of or the day after. Thank you for joining me. Take care.